Hello, welcome back. I'm joined by James Withall, the CEO of Rupert Resources. James, good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. Thanks very much for the opportunity.
No, not at all. Let's, for those less familiar, quick overview of Rupert Resources, where you are, where you're listed.
Okay, yeah, so Rupert Resources, TSXV listed company. Our focus is in Finland, northern Finland in Lapland, where we've been exploring for the last 5 years. And we've made this Ikkary discovery, which is the most, I guess, what everyone knows about the company anyway, roughly 4 million ounces, 2.5 grams, so quite an exceptional discovery in Europe. And we made that a couple of years ago.
It's been termed as the most significant gold discovery in at least 30 years in Europe, right?
Yes, I guess it has been, which is it is quite a compliment to the team. That's really the reason we went to Finland, because that was where when I came across to join the company, where I saw the real opportunity.
Let's talk about that actually, because obviously you were a fund manager over at Baker Steel not too long ago.
Yeah,
they've approached you about this Pahtavaara mine and project. So tell us about the origin of how you got involved and what's been happening over the last few years.
Yeah, okay. So it was quite an interesting situation. So I was originally a geologist, worked in Western Australia through the 90s, and then was involved in a vanadium project and other things. So I've been across different sectors, not just gold. And then, I joined Baker Steel in 2003 after I came back to the UK. And was there for 13 years as a fund manager and partner. It was a great business, and we grew a lot and looked at a lot of companies all around the world and constantly looking at things. And I actually went to look at Rupert Resources as a potential investor in 2016. Was invited there by one of the major shareholders, Harry Dobson, who was behind the original Kirkland Lake gold company. So when they acquired that asset originally, and so I'd been an investor of theirs from the early days, and so we knew each other throughout that. So I went to go and have a look at it, and it was quite interesting. They certainly had some, it was an interesting project, a smaller mine that maybe hadn't seen the attention it should have had over the years, and it was been run on and off for 14 years by then. My point to them was that the real opportunity wasn't the mine; it was the fact that by doing this acquisition, which they were completing at the time of this asset, and they only spent $500,000 on it to buy it, plus 2 million in a future royalty on the capped royalty in the project. But really, the opportunity was more than that. They've managed to pick up through that acquisition a huge portion of the belt, and of this prospective belt, and that was really for me what got me interested. So initially I was actually quite critical about what they were doing at the mine and why they're progressing that, and so that was my feedback. And so 6 months later they actually approached me and said, okay, would you be interested in coming across and working and being the CEO of Rupert? And I guess long story short, I made the decision to come across, and the real reason was this opportunity, but also 2 points: the opportunity geologically, but also the potential backing that the company had by the shareholders. It had, we have quite a unique position, that we have a group of core shareholders that's been incredibly supportive. So when you're at the bottom of the market like you are then, most junior companies have a valuation of $3 million. They're scraping around just to get the next bit of money. We fortunately had a valuation in about $60 or $70 million at that time. And the shareholders were very committed to the long-term opportunity that was there. And so, that's really what drew me to it was the mixture of both. And otherwise I always I have a lot of sympathy for the guys that start up a junior exploration company on the hope you'll do that, but then you're totally at the whim of the next drill results. Whereas we had a strong base to work from.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's there aren't many companies that are going to start like yours in terms of you had a fair amount of financial backing and a pretty secure future with that backing early on, and obviously the investors behind them saw your vision of, let's not focus on a small gold mine that we already have. Let's have a look at the regional play. Yeah,
and then the first thing we did was actually reappraise when I came in was, stop drilling at the Pahtavaara mine, having some really good results, and it's a deposit that has some really high grades. It'll be part of our PEA that we put out. It's a very, it's a nice project. Unfortunately, it's had a lot of it mined out of it history, but first thing was just to even step back from that, because one of the, I can talk about it later on, the exploration, the way we approach exploration. But the thing that struck me was that it'd been around and discovered in the late 80s and been operated since mid 90s. But actually, when you asked anyone involved in it today, Why is it there? What's the geological model? Geologically, it's not somewhere you obviously go looking for a gold mine. It was just discovered because it outcropped to surface. But no one can really tell you an answer to that. And my test as an investor was always, if you went to a project and you speak to the geological team and they really had no idea of why the deposit might have been there geologically because if you don't understand why, you're not really going to understand any potential upside. So that was what struck me. But I mean, yeah, it was more of a judgment call from me and then looking at what we thought the upside was.
One of the other things, you were talking about the exploration model, or the way that you go about your exploration is quite a bit different as well, right? So you were already on a good start with large financial back-in, with deep pockets to go and do regional exploration in a greenstone belt that looked very prospective. But at the same time, you had a set of criterias. You didn't want to get caught up on small holes and small plays. You had basically a criteria. Could you just run us through that?
Yeah, I guess quickly to finish on part of it, we reassessed. One of the things we did, and going to your point, the first thing we did was really understand what that was. So we actually ended up, and now we do believe we understand why Pahtavaara is there. We understand a bit of a model for it, and we have a resource of just under 500,000 ounces there. So which was quite a transformation from when we took it on. But I think that was really an exercise to get the team to think in a way that you really got to actually stop drilling and use the geological understanding and work from that and really develop, I guess, really the knowledge within the team. And then to your point about, setting a level. So I guess I've been in the investment industry for a long time and finding another 200,000 ounces here or 500,000 ounces there, in reality, it's a pretty sound principle. It's as hard to develop a small mine as it is to develop a big mine. It still requires all the input on the environmental side, all the study stages that you have to go through. All that hard work, is the actual quantum of work is very, very similar for a small opportunity as a big opportunity. And if you do all that and you've only got free cash flows of $5 or $10 million a year, you're really going to struggle to ever build that business. So it was like, okay, well, I've seen that playbook too many times. So let's set the bar a lot higher. So the exploration team had a goal that really owned you to look early on for deposits that had the potential to have an NSR value, so even just a revenue value of $2 billion US. And that already puts a cap on it. So if you drill a couple of nice holes in gold, which are relatively easy to do in some small veins, and it's a few meters at 5 grams, that's all very exciting, but it's very unlikely to become a deposit of scale and also have the economic parameters around it. And narrow, skinny deposits, lots of waste to mine, all these things. So you can filter out things very quickly. And that was really the principle we set down, is to set a high hurdle rate for exploration and ensure that your geological team understand that, and that, most importantly, they can feed that decision, that information back to you in the team very quickly, so you can dynamically make a decision to not carry on doing that and to move on to the next one. Because the biggest challenge ultimately in this business is not getting wedded to things that aren't going to become deposits of that are ultimately relevant, I think is probably the word.
Obviously, with Ikkary at the moment, 4 million ounces, 2.5 grams per tonne. Now you've got that deposit, what's the temptation to then sort of throw that out the window and look at smaller satellites and try and incorporate that in? Because you have found some amazing other targets. Or is the real priority now continue to find the next one, right? And the next 4 million ounce, 5 million ounce super deposit.
It's a very relevant point, because we're right at that time, so you find your big deposit, your model works out, you've got success, you do that, and then along the way, Ikkary was the 6th discovery, so it's quite easy to go back to your other 5 and go, let's see if that one's a bit better than it was. And look, I think if they're right next door to Ikkary, certainly, the potential economics of a deposit like Ikkary can unlock the value of those smaller projects. And we have done some drilling at those other deposits, and we're still exploring within the vicinity for Ikkary right now. It's about trying to keep the discipline on that. So we've drilled Ikkary the first year, we put out a resource quite early on. This last winter, we've been doing a lot of infill drilling at Ikkary. And why have we done that? I guess the important point is to get a lot of confidence in what we do have. And on the back of that, yes, we have drilled quite a lot of sort of near mine things, but I guess right now we're in that point where we've almost sort of banked the Ikkary ounces. So now it's the time to make sure the discipline's right, reappraise the targets, probably actually step back a little bit on exploration and the pace of exploration somewhat, and start, almost get back into the mindset of pre-Ikkary. Lots of geological thinking. We've collected so much data. I mean, we have found as you said at the beginning, one of the most significant discoveries in Europe in the last 30 years. So make sure you really understand that, because that could well be the key to you unlocking the ability to find the next one of those. And I think if you keep on just rushing on to do the next thing, that can possibly be the thing that is your undoing. So it's about making sure you keep that discipline.
What's the work at the moment looking at? You're saying you can take a slight step back, analyze all you must have so much data, but analyze that, interpret the geological models around you. What's the workflow in terms of, because you've still got quite a bit of budget left for drilling, right? So how's it looking in terms of target? You've got so many different license area, such a large license area. How are you prioritizing where to go and drill, and what sort of work are we expecting over the next 6 months?
When we acquired Pahtavaara, we had the Pahtavaara mine, and then we had about 125 square k's of other licenses, which is the Haina license, which is where most of the discoveries are. But today we have in the region of 730 square kilometres. So you say, that's a bit, how are you going to manage that? It's a good question. I think, the reality is we've just opportunistically picked up ground. We knew this discovery was coming, so we started picking up ground ahead of time to make sure we managed to get some of the most interesting parts of the belt that we thought before there was any sort of land grab or other companies making it harder to do that. So that's where we collected it. But we haven't just collected random bits of ground. Obviously, we've built that up over the last couple of years based on our geological understanding. So there's been a discipline about that. And we'll sequentially move those targets. We've been talking about that a bit in our presentations and press releases, and most notably the recent one. We have a series of, I think we have 5 different sort of exploration target areas, one of those including Ikkary, and we're sequentially going through that. Doing the first, this summer every summer we have a team of geos in the field. We're doing that right now. And we have done that since 2016. Then we follow that up with the base of till work. And then we just follow it up with, some very targeted drilling off the back of that work. And we're layering some geophysics in with that as well. But you can actually get through this ground quite quickly when you know what the settings that you're looking for. You can filter it relatively quickly. But I think what's different maybe to us compared to, previous people in the belt, if you see what I mean. Yes, we have a model which we're developing, but we're also very open to that model changing and evolving that model, because not every deposit, all the deposits will look slightly different. Yeah. So if you just go chasing the next Ikkary, you might well miss the next deposit ultimately.
Well, true, because obviously even when you look at the land packages in and around your area, you've also got base metals with Boliden and Anglo sort of to the east, haven't you? And then you've also got more gold plays with Agnico up towards the north or northwest. So I guess if you are just looking for one type of project, you're right. You'll probably miss the others. But very briefly, let's talk about the neighbourhood around you, because you've got, it's turned into, since you've made the discovery, realistically, it's B2 Golder in the area. You've got Orion in the area. You've got a lot of different majors, and then there's loads of new explorers that have sort of rushed in. Are you anticipating quite a bit of consolidation in the region over the next few years? What's your current view?
Good question. There probably will be consolidation. I imagine that there will be. There has to be. Ultimately, that opportunity is there. And I think, but probably what is more exciting and probably what, keeps us excited about Rupert Resources and coming to work every day and do that is the fact that, the thesis was when we came here that this was a very untested belt. It had some very good work done by the Geological Survey in Finland, GTK. There's a lot of good baseline work that had been done in the 80s and early 90s, but then it had sort of had this hiatus period where, apart from Anglo-American in there looking to discover Sakati, who did quite a lot of, and First Quantum, hadn't been that much work done, and certainly, not to the extent we are. So, what we've done is come in, apply a very commercial model to exploration with this high filter in it, and shown relatively quickly that you're going to be able to find things. And even the press release we put out this week, there's other things, we continue to find things which were just completely unknown about prior to this. So I guess, I expect there's going to be quite a lot more discovery in the region, both on the gold side, but certainly on the base metal side. Sakatti isn't going to be a one-off. And geologically, our understanding of, getting really into the technical details of the, different intrusive stages that's happened there and the different styles of intrusives, I think definitely that whole region yields itself to have great mineral potential. And with all these new companies coming in and spending money, for many years, for the last few years, we've been the biggest exploration expenditure company in Finland. So, that's little Rupert resources, if you see what I mean. But now you're starting to see that change. You've seen a lot of the big majors come in, and I don't mean gold majors necessarily, some of the diversified majors come back into Finland, seeing that opportunity. I think just watch your space, I think, really. I think there has to be some sort of consolidation over time.
Just going back to your own exploration at the moment, because the drill rigs are still turning, and you released assays, I think it was yesterday or the day before, very recently, with some pretty good intercepts. I mean, one of them was only half a kilometre north of Ikkary. Yeah. Very interesting gold intercept there. I mean, where are you with the exploration work on the other licenses outside of Ikkary? I mean, in say, for example, with Ikkary, are you a few years behind where you were when you discovered Ikkary? Are you because originally it was all base of till samples and then went on to the drilling, right? So where are you in terms of the other licenses that you are, or other areas that you are exploring on? Where do you think you are in the timescale in terms of potentially finding something?
Yeah, I think, I guess in some ways you could say a lot of those are sort of 2019 vintage now, if you see what I mean. I guess, but I'm slightly more positive on them than that because we've built up this team quite organically in country. So Dr. Charlie Subrick is the exploration manager, and we've had, in her team is a group of Finnish geologists that have basically been with us from the beginning. And so just, that knowledge base has been built up. We've had basically 5 years of building that expertise in the exploration in the belt. So whilst the stage of the company, the stage of those projects may be Pahtavaara West, where we've just been finished doing base of till work and now beginning to do some drilling. Project Sisnaka we talked about that in this press release only has a few holes into it, but that's had some base of tills, going back doing some more base of till now. Yes, whilst they might be at that stage, we expect to be able to sort of move them through to sort of a yes or no stage about spending more money quicker than we did with Ikkary, with the Ikkary discoveries, effectively. But you still have to do the work, which does take a bit of time. And more importantly, you have to take the time just to wait for the results to come back and be methodical about what you do about it. At the early days, we used to go and see investors and they say, this is a bit dull, it's a bit of a science experiment. You're very methodical about how you do that. But ultimately, if you're not methodical, you're going to miss the opportunity anyway. So they're all at different phases of the time. I guess worst case maybe back 3 years, but some of them are maybe only a year behind Ikkary, some of those areas.
Okay, so just going back to the 500 metres north of Ikkary, where you've just released the new assays. From my understanding, that wasn't actually discovered through base of till, which is what Rupert are pretty famous for, right?
Yeah.
How was that one discovered?
We understand very much the limitations of base till. It's a great tool for finding near surface deposits. But obviously, if the deposit hasn't come near to the surface, you're unlikely to find it. And so earlier this year, we did a deeper level geophysics program over Ikkary and through up to Heinä Central and all the way to the west. It's in conjunction with the neighbouring company B2 Gold doing the joint venture. So I guess why do you do those? Ultimately, you're trying to understand your deposit a bit. I keep on saying this bit about trying to understand it, but all the surface methods, whether it's be surface geophysics or base of till, they're all in just like 2 dimensions. You're just at the surface, so that's that's good, and it's a good first way to do exploration. But the drilling obviously helps you see in 3 dimensions, but you can't drill everywhere. And that's just because they're just needles in a haystack, to think of an analogy. Just an incredibly large haystack as well. The reality is you're trying to use the geophysics to help you look in that 3rd dimension, and try and understand, the geological setting in that 3rd dimension. So the drilling that we did at Ikkary North, I mean, initially it was really just to test that geophysical model, because we had this chargeability anomaly to the north that we could see in the geophysics, and we modeled it out a bit, and we thought, that has similarities to the Ikkary setting geophysically. So we couldn't unfortunately drill the bit where that comes near to the surface. So we set the drills right back, because it was spring, it was melting, all the snow was melting. So we set the drills further back to the north and said, look, we'll try and drill that area deeper down to see what those structures are like, and just really to see whether there's the potential for them to yield gold. So those intercepts weren't Ikkary intercepts, and we don't know whether drilling up further will yield those. But what was important is that those structures have the same, and what we were seeing in the geology had definitely a lot of similarities in things we're looking for: alteration, the styles, the breccias, the sedimentary units that we're looking for, and also that they contain gold ultimately. The best way to think about that release is that it's really just like first pass. This is how we do exploration, and it's sort of it's a demonstration of that, really. So that at the moment, there's no more drilling going on there right now, because we want to be able to drill further up dip, which we'll do in the winter. But again, it's just part of that learning process and part of developing our understanding. And fortunately, the team continue to always impress by every time they go and do one of these things, they go and drill something new, which is testament to them. So congratulations to them.
What's the amount of meters looking like that's left? You had the target of around, was it 80,000 metres at the beginning of the year?
It's about 80,000 metres in the calendar year. Yeah, 80,000 metres.
Will that continue next year as well? Are you expecting 80,000 metres in 2023?
Yeah, I think in this release, we mentioned that, think about the next 12 months, there'll probably be about 75,000 metres of potential drilling. And so that's a budget. I mean, whether we do that much, we'll see. But, we have the equipment and everything lined up to do that.
And obviously, you've already done most of the infill on Ikkary. So I'd imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of that would go now towards the more regional. Yeah,
the Ikkary infill drilling, a lot of our announcements over this last winter were Ikkary infill drilling, and they were very successful. You only look back at the releases, and obviously that's given us a lot of confidence. A lot of the time when you drill gold deposits, you wonder whether you're going to have that continuity and that consistency, and Ikkary, is quite unique that it is delivered that, so that does free up a certain amount of our equipment and time to actually step back from there. We still are going to be drilling the periphery of Ikkary, so because we won't have converted it all to a high level, so we have to drill that, and we still are drilling deep at Ikkary. So we have a rig there at the moment. It's operating right now, so that program will be carrying on as one of our exploration targets. Really, the conversion work is kind of not exploration, but everything else is beyond that. Looking to extend the limits is certainly, you call that as part of our regional exploration program, really. But it does, as you're right to say, it does free up a certain amount of time and equipment to start, to make sure we carry on this regional exploration program. And the targets that we're, the 500 metres north is one of them. The Sisnacker is another one. There's probably about 3 or 4 others which we haven't talked about that are, in the pipeline that we want to focus on this winter.
Just looking at the neighbourhood again, I know we touched on it. We mentioned consolidation, but obviously Agnico are 15% shareholder at the moment. I know you get asked it all the time. You must be sick about talking about it. But what's the current voice coming out of that camp at the moment? Where do you think they're sitting with Finland in general, and how happy are they with their current position?
Look, I think they've obviously made the Kirtland Gold acquisition, closed that earlier on in the year. I think, I imagine, I'm not speaking for them, I imagine they're going through a period of consolidation. So where do they allocate? They've had some great results in Canada if you follow the stock. Certainly the Detour asset, and I think, they're probably in that phase. But when I read coverage on it or analyst commentary on it, it seems that they do seem pretty committed to Finland. I think it's still an area of that they're committed to, and rightly so. It's an area of great opportunity. I mean, Kittila itself, they're obviously hoping to complete the shaft project by the end of this year, early next year, and that, that's quite a significant milestone for that project because it really changes the dynamic for them there. And they're doing exploration there, and obviously they're kind of exploring by proxy through Rupert by owning 15% of us. And what we've done is really, I guess we've done a very good job for them by demonstrating more prospectivity in the belt. What does that mean for Rupert? I think, we have a good working relationship with them. As always said, we have investment agreements and public domain, and we have a good dialogue. And I think I like to think that we'll just continue that relationship and we'll see where it goes in the future. But I guess for investors, maybe if you're looking at it, I guess they are only a 15% shareholder. They don't own 19.9, or they're not a majority shareholder. Our core shareholders that I talked about right at the beginning still represent a vast portion of the shares in Rupert. That's why we're a little bit illiquid in terms of the trading, and they are very committed to Rupert in the long term. And so on a M&A side, we still very much have control of our own destiny. And I think if you're a new shareholder coming to Rupert, you don't, challenge always in these situations where you have a bigger company on board sometimes. The investment side is like, but are they really in control of their own destiny here? And I think we feel that we are, because we have that's very strong, robust shareholder platform beyond that. And with the last two financings, we brought on some incredible, really established large institutional funds that we feel that hopefully we can count on their support going forward as well, as long as we continue to deliver.
Well, I think as an investor looking at this, you've got the exploration, you've obviously got the world-class deposit that we've already discussed, but then you've got the exploration upside. But I guess it's whether or not Agnico or potentially B2 or whoever in the region, or even outside the region, if they want to wait for you to make that next discovery and it becomes even more expensive potentially. But
potentially, yeah. Look, I think it's our business model is to create value. So our business model is to spend $5 an ounce finding things and ultimately get rewarded for them. I mean, that's a gold-centric one, but just as an example, you spend $5, $8, $9, $10 an ounce in the discovery phase, and if you can demonstrate deposits like Ikkary or something similar, you can get those valued for $100 to $200 an ounce in exploration. And as you move it through, look at the producers there, they get sort of $400 or $500 an ounce, depending on what potential cash margins that they can produce. So that's the business model. So our model is to be expensive as a company. That's ultimately what we're trying to achieve. Not expensive, we're trying to create value, and ultimately if we're successful, we create value. And people can call it expensive or not, but ultimately it goes back to that right all the way back to the threshold bit. We're looking for big deposits, but we're also looking, the geologists have to come to me and say, this could be not a big deposit, but also a very high margin deposit. And it's really about the margin on the ounce you're discovering, not that even, that's what you're trying to demonstrate. And that's what, the value as an exploration company, what's the market giving you? It's giving you a portion of the future cash margin on the ounces. So that $150 an ounce, share ounce. Why do we get it? Why do some companies only trade on $50? Because ultimately they're probably quite low margin ounces. If you find really good quality deposits, which is ultimately, in my mind, the only deposits that really should be developed, because you've got all the other elements, environment side, the social side, all the other stakeholders to please. They should be quite highly valued out, those ounces, because they will, they go on to allow a company to continue to be a resources company, find more deposits, grow. That's ultimately it's a growth company. So you come from nothing, you find something, you develop it, and then you're using that. You've got to have good cash flows from that too. So it's sorry, long answer to your question, but fortunately for investors, if you find good deposits, they're going to be valued highly.
Well, you mentioned there as well, with $5 to explore per ounce, right? And then in the exploration phase, the value you get for that is a bit less. And as you move through development and production, the value should increase. Let's talk about how you're going to increase the values you already have in or the ounces you already have, right? So what's the timeline here to production with Ikkary? You've got the PEA coming out this year, PFS next year. Well, maybe you can just run us through that and how you're going to go about it, because there's obviously the exploration upside we've spoken about loads here, but there's still value to be created with what you have.
You know, the exploration of the highest risk element, obviously you're going to get the highest rate of return on that. That's that portion. Obviously, that's when you go from your $10 an ounce to 100 or to 10 to 20 times returns. And that's why people invest in exploration companies. But beyond that, you know, it's our heart. We're still an exploration company. That's why we're still exploring, to try and deliver more of those returns. But focusing on how do you unlock the next, you know, how do you take it from 150 or 200 to $400 an ounce? And it's important, you know, you go through these steps. The PEA we will have out before the end of the year. We've said the second half of this year. Hopefully, you know, we're working on that right now. It's sort of getting towards the pointy end of that program. But I think investors should be careful not to, you know, the resources for that were struck back in May. It will importantly incorporate Pahtavaara. There'll be some resource statements, hopefully potentially a resource statement for Haina Central in there. So start encompassing more than just Ikkary. We call it the Rupert Lapland Project when we talk about the PEA. Because all these things have to come to it's all part of the value creation. So that's the first step, and that will give investors a sense of some of the potential metrics. Beyond that, we're already doing the work, the environmental work, the waste characterizer, all these other elements that go on in the background that people don't really see. All the work that you need to do the pre-feasibility study is already going on in Rupert, and building up that work in the idea that we will complete that work over the following 12 months. And then, you know, the key thing for that is you use that information, your pre-feasibility study, so you're a bit more certainty. And importantly, we're exploring very hard through this winter to make sure that if there's something else that should be included in that study, that we make sure we identify early enough and do the work early enough to encompass that in the next level of study. And then that goes to submitting your environmental impact assessment to the authorities, who will then review that. And then whilst they're reviewing it, you do your final feasibility study and firm down, you know, exactly what the project will look like, what you're going to build. Hopefully by then you're at the permitting decision phase, probably in reality, probably a year after that. So I think you're looking at a series of years here through to 2025, where you're still in that study, environmental impact, permitting phase before you actually make that decision to develop the project. And through that period, you know, the certainty about those cash flows and the certainty about the margins that I talked about before will, you know, be demonstrated to investors, and hopefully those ounces that we're going to mine will be re-rated to a higher value through that process. And importantly, you know, the big thing investors is our job as a company is to do all that work, but also manage the balance sheet of the company and make sure that you're not overly diluting through that period. So when you get to that point where you're going to spend the money and build the mine, that you have, you know, so many companies can go through that process, and you know, there's quite a bit of money that needs to be spent, but it's about managing that well. And so when you get to the point that you get a decision to build it and mine it, that yes, at that point you can really show a return on shareholders' equity to all the people that invested back in day one. And maybe that's my bit, as the thing that niggles me most as an investment manager coming to being a CEO, is that I'm very concerned that ultimately your legacy as a company ultimately is if you actually manage to make a return on the shareholders' equity from that put in the early money.
But you have demonstrated that. I mean, throughout.
And that's how we get judged as a management team. So, but yeah, but you know, those challenges never stop.
James, thank you so much for running us through the story. And yeah, hopefully we'll catch up again soon. But it's been good to get an update.
Yeah, no, pleasure. Thanks very much, Peter. Cheers.